Ancient history refers to the period between roughly 3000 BCE and 500 CE, encompassing the rise and fall of some of the world's earliest and most influential civilizations. This era saw the development of organized societies, written language, structured governments, and major technological advancements that laid the foundation for modern civilization. It begins with the emergence of writing systems in Mesopotamia and Egypt, which allowed societies to record laws, religious beliefs, and historical events, marking the transition from prehistory to recorded history. The period ends around 500 CE, coinciding with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which marked a shift toward the Middle Ages in Europe. Studying ancient history provides insight into the origins of governance, trade, warfare, and culture, highlighting the enduring legacies of these early civilizations. This video will consist of an assortment of history facts from various different regions throughout this time period. The birth of civilization, Mesopotamia and Egypt. Civilization, a word we often associate with cities, technology, and culture. But where did it all begin? To answer that, we journey back over 5,000 years to two great river valleys, Mesopotamia and Egypt. Here, amidst floodplains and deserts, humanity took its first steps toward complex society. This is the story of the birth of civilization. Civilization is more than just people living together. It's a system, one that includes cities, writing, organized government, religion, social classes, and economic trade. And nowhere is this early blueprint more visible than in Mesopotamia and Egypt, two cradles of civilization that shaped the course of human history. Mesopotamia means land between rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. This fertile land, now modern-day Iraq and parts of Syria and Iran, was rich in silt, but prone to unpredictable flooding. The Nile River in Egypt, on the other hand, flooded like clockwork. Its predictable rhythm allowed Egyptians to plan, farm, and flourish. But geography shaped more than agriculture. Mesopotamia's open plains made it vulnerable to invasion, giving rise to fortified city-states and a worldview of chaos and uncertainty. Egypt, shielded by deserts and seas, remained relatively secure. The result? A civilization with a strong sense of stability and cosmic order. In Mesopotamia, cities like Uruk, and Babylon emerged, each a city-state with its own king. Power was decentralized, and rulers often claimed divine right, serving as mediators between the gods and people. Egypt was different. From the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE by Pharaoh Narmer, Egypt was ruled as a single kingdom. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god on earth. His word was law, his authority absolute. This centralized power helped Egypt remain unified for millennia. Both civilizations developed administrative systems, employing scribes and officials to manage agriculture, taxation, and justice. Religion was the heart of life in both lands. In Mesopotamia, gods like Anu, Enlil, and Inanna ruled over nature and fate. Life was uncertain. In the afterlife, a dark, shadowy realm reflected that fear. Egyptians had a different view. Their gods, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, were seen as protectors, and the afterlife was a paradise for those who lived righteously. Tombs, mummification, and elaborate rituals reflected their belief in life beyond death. Temples were the center of both religious and political life. Ziggurats towered over Mesopotamian cities, while Egyptian pyramids stood as eternal monuments to the divine pharaohs. Society in both Mesopotamia and Egypt was hierarchical. At the top were kings and priests. Below them, scribes, merchants, artisans, farmers, and slaves. Gender roles varied. While both were patriarchal, Egyptian women could own property, initiate divorce, and even become priestesses, rights that were rare in Mesopotamia. Daily life revolved around farming, craftsmanship, and trade. Most people lived in small homes and worked hard to support their families and communities. Agriculture was the backbone of both economies. The rivers enabled irrigation, and crops like wheat, barley, and flax sustained their populations. Trade extended their influence beyond their borders. Mesopotamians traded with the Indus Valley, while Egyptians traded with Nubia and the Levant. Both civilizations developed systems of accounting and trade records, early versions of economic management. Writing was revolutionary, and both cultures developed their own systems. The Sumerians of Mesopotamia created cuneiform, the world's first written language, etched into clay tablets for recording laws, trade, and stories. In Egypt, hieroglyphics adorned temple walls, tombs, and papyrus scrolls. The Rosetta Stone would later unlock their secrets to the modern world. Literacy was largely reserved for scribes, highly trained officials who held great power through their knowledge of writing. Mesopotamia gave us the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving literary work. They developed the wheel, early forms of math and astronomy, and created the first legal code, Hammurabi's Code. Egypt stunned the world with its architectural marvels, pyramids, temples, and obelisks. They advanced medicine, created a 365-day calendar, and mastered irrigation and construction. These civilizations laid the foundation for law, governance, science, and art that would influence Greece, Rome, and beyond. In many ways, Mesopotamia and Egypt were alike. Both developed along rivers, practiced polytheism, and built complex societies with rigid social hierarchies. But key differences shaped their destinies. Mesopotamia's fragmented city-states led to frequent conflict. Egypt's centralized monarchy provided stability and continuity. The Mesopotamian worldview was anxious and uncertain. The Egyptians saw the universe as balanced. The great empires, Persia, Greece, and Rome. 3 empires. 3 legacies that shaped the course of human history. From the monumental palaces of Persia to the marble temples of Greece and the colossal arenas of Rome. These ancient civilizations laid the foundations of the modern world. This is the story of the great empires, Persia, Greece, and Rome. In the 6th century BCE, a tribal chieftain from a small kingdom in modern-day Iran would rise to change the world. His name was Cyrus the Great, and with him, the Persian Empire was born. While Persia expanded east and west, Greece was just beginning its transformation, from scattered city-states to a force of culture, philosophy, and power. And in the west, along the Tiber River, a small settlement called Rome was learning the art of conquest. 3 civilizations, 3 paths to greatness. Cyrus the Great didn't just conquer, he united. His empire stretched from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean, yet he ruled with tolerance, not tyranny. His successors, like Darius and Xerxes, built an empire of order. Roads spanned continents. Governors, called satraps, maintained peace. A common language and coinage tied it all together, and at the heart of it all, a powerful belief system. Zoroastrianism, a cosmic struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. The Persians weren't just warriors, they were builders, administrators, and visionaries. But then came a challenge. From the west, in the rocky hills of Greece, unity was rare, but genius was not. Independent city-states, known as polis, developed their own systems of government. Athens gave birth to democracy. Sparta became a military powerhouse. Their society valued reason, debate, and beauty. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked questions still debated today. Dramatists wrote timeless tragedies. Sculptors captured ideal forms. And athletes competed in Olympic games that echoed through the centuries. But Greece wasn't always peaceful. When Persia came knocking, the Greek city-states did the unthinkable. They united. Battles at Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis became legends. And when the war was over, a new power rose. Alexander, son of Philip of Macedon, was just 20 when he inherited the throne. By 30, he had conquered the Persian Empire. He spread Greek language and culture across the known world, from Egypt to India. Cities like Alexandria became centers of knowledge, blending Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian traditions. This was the Hellenistic Age, an era of fusion, exploration, and innovation. But Alexander's empire didn't last. After his death, it fractured. The stage was set for the rise of a new power. Rome began as a small kingdom. Then it became a republic, ruled by elected officials and guided by a powerful senate. Through wars, treaties, and sheer ambition, Rome expanded across Italy, then beyond. The Punic Wars with Carthage gave Rome dominance over the western Mediterranean. But with power came conflict, civil wars, assassinations, dictators, until one man ended the chaos, Octavian, later known as Augustus. Under Augustus, Rome became an empire. The Pax Romana, Roman peace, brought stability and prosperity for over 200 years. Roman engineering built roads, aqueducts, and cities. Roman law influenced legal systems for millennia, and Latin, their language, became the root of many modern tongues. The Persians brought tolerance. The Greeks brought philosophy. The Romans brought structure. Persians respected the gods of the peoples they ruled. Greeks explored the human condition and asked, "What is the good life?" Romans spread their culture through roads, cities, and citizenship. And when religion changed, when Christianity emerged, Rome became the platform for a faith that would span the globe. In time, the Western Roman Empire fell, but its eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, lived on for another 1,000 years. Persia and Greece clashed, but also admired one another. Alexander wore Persian robes and adopted Persian customs. Greece and Rome, a complicated love story. Rome conquered Greece, but never stopped imitating it. And Persia and Rome, rivals for centuries. East and West, locked in a struggle for control over trade, borders, and ideology. Yet despite their conflicts, all three contributed to the same grand project: civilization. The Persian concept of imperial governance lives on in modern states. The Greek tradition of questioning and creativity laid the foundations of science, democracy, and philosophy. Rome gave us law, infrastructure, and a vision of empire that still influences global politics. They were not perfect. They enslaved, they conquered, they fell. But their stories are part of our own. Today, we walk on Roman roads. We think with Greek minds, and we admire Persian kings who ruled with dignity and vision. Major conflicts. The Peloponnesian War. the Punic Wars, and the fall of Rome. Athens stood as a beacon of democracy, culture, and naval supremacy. Sparta, its opposite in nearly every way, embodied discipline, land power, and oligarchy. When these two titans clashed, the result wasn't just war, it was the unraveling of the Greek world. This is the story of the Peloponnesian War. It all began after a great victory. The Greek city-states had united to defeat the Persian Empire. But from the ashes of that war, two powers emerged, unequal and uneasy allies. Athens, leading the Delian League, had grown rich and influential, but its leadership looked more like empire than alliance. Sparta, protector of tradition and land-based strength, began to grow wary. Beneath the surface, tensions boiled. Conflicts between allies of Athens and Sparta became more frequent. Corinth and Corcyra, Potidaea, Megara. Each incident tested the fragile balance. Then came the final straw, the Megarian decree. Athens blocked trade with the Spartan ally of Megara, an economic chokehold. Sparta had had enough. Demands were made, ultimatums issued, and in 431 BCE, war was declared. At first, war looked familiar. Sparta invaded Attica every year, burning crops. Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, refused to fight on land. Instead, they harassed the Peloponnesian coast with their powerful navy. But Pericles' strategy came at a cost. Thousands crowded inside the walls of Athens, and with them came disease. A plague swept the city. Men, women, children, and Pericles himself died. The Athenian dream began to darken. After nearly a decade of bloodshed, peace was signed. The peace of Nicias. But it was fragile and brief. In 415 BCE, Athens saw a new opportunity for glory and expansion in Sicily. They launched one of the largest military expeditions in their history. The goal, conquer Syracuse. The reality, disaster. Leaders feuded, plans collapsed, and Sparta, now with Persian support, helped Syracuse resist. The Athenian fleet was annihilated. Thousands died, thousands more enslaved. It was a turning point. Athens would never fully recover. Sparta now played a new game. They fortified Decilia and Attica, cutting Athens off from its resources. With Persian gold, they built a navy to rival Athens. Meanwhile, revolts erupted across the Athenian Empire. Internal strife plagued Athens. Democracy itself was overthrown for a time. Two mighty civilizations, one sea between them, and a struggle that would decide the fate of the ancient world. This is the story of the Punic Wars. In the 3rd century BCE, the Mediterranean was a chessboard of rising powers. On the one side, Rome, a land-based republic, fierce, disciplined, and expanding rapidly through Italy. On the other, Carthage, a wealthy maritime empire descended from Phoenician traders, controlling vast trade networks and colonies. They had little in common, except ambition, and their paths were about to collide. The spark came in Sicily, where Rome and Carthage both laid claim to influence. A minor dispute in Messana erupted into open war. Rome, a land power, built a navy, something it had never needed before, and it built it fast. To level the playing field, Rome invented the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned naval battles into infantry fights. Battles raged across the seas. Mylae, Ecnomus, Drepana. For 23 years they fought. At last Carthage, war-weary and broke, sued for peace. It ceded Sicily, paid a massive indemnity, and Rome had its first overseas province. But peace was temporary, and resentment simmered. Carthage, humiliated, descended into civil strife. Its unpaid mercenaries rebelled, an ugly and brutal conflict. Rome took advantage, seizing Sardinia and Corsica. Carthage, too weak to resist, lost more territory and pride. But it wasn't defeated. Under General Hamilcar Barca, it turned to a new frontier, Spain. There, a new Carthaginian empire rose, led by a name that would haunt Roman history forever: Hannibal. In 218 BCE, Hannibal besieged Saguntum, a Roman ally in Spain. Rome declared war, but Hannibal didn't wait. He marched over the Alps with soldiers, horses, and war elephants. Against all odds, he reached Italy. What followed were some of the most devastating defeats Rome would ever suffer. Trebia, Lake Trasimene, Cannae. At Cannae, 50,000 Romans fell in a single day. Encircled, crushed, annihilated. Allies defected. Fear gripped Rome, but Rome did not fall. Under Fabius Maximus, it adopted a new strategy: delay, avoid, survive. Hannibal's brilliance lit up Italy, but he lacked reinforcements, and time was not on his side. While Hannibal raged in Italy, another Roman commander rose in Spain: Publius Cornelius Scipio. Young, bold, and unorthodox, Scipio pushed the Carthaginians out of Iberia. Then he took a daring step. He invaded Africa itself. Carthage called Hannibal home. The two greatest generals of the age met in 202 BCE near Zama. Hannibal's cavalry faltered. Scipio's tactics prevailed. Hannibal was defeated. Carthage was broken. It surrendered its fleet, paid an enormous indemnity, and swore never to wage war without Rome's permission. But its people endured. Its economy rebounded, and that Rome could not tolerate. Years passed. Rome grew paranoid. Politicians like Cato the Elder ended every speech with the same chilling words: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. And so, Rome found a reason. Carthage defended itself against Numidian attacks, violating Roman terms. That was enough. Rome declared war, siege, resistance, fire, blood. For 3 years, Carthage fought. In 146 BCE, the Romans broke through. The city was burned to the ground. Survivors were sold into slavery. Carthage was no more. The Punic Wars reshaped the ancient world. Rome emerged as the master of the Mediterranean. Its power now stretched from Spain to Greece, from Gaul to North Africa. But it had learned from Hannibal. The next Roman wars would be larger, farther, and more ruthless. In Carthage, it became a ghost. Its ashes scattered, its name cursed, its memory immortalized. 3 wars, a century of struggle, 2 civilizations, 1 survivor. The Punic Wars were not just about territory or trade. They were a test of endurance, strategy, and the will to dominate history itself. And in the end, only Rome remained. Long before skyscrapers and satellites, before printing presses and power grids, human civilization laid its roots in clay, stone, ink, and stars. This is the story of our ancient ancestors, how they built beauty, sought truth, and chased the stars. This is the legacy of art, literature, and science in the ancient world. Culture is what survives the fall of empires. Is more than monuments. Its ideas, stories, and discoveries pass from one generation to the next. From the sands of Egypt to the rivers of Mesopotamia, from the hills of Greece to the heart of China, civilizations rose not just with swords, but with pens and paintbrushes. Let us begin with art. In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamians built ziggurats that reached toward the gods. They carved images into stone walls, kings in battle, gods with wings, and great lions frozen in eternal hunts. Tiny cylinder seals rolled across clay, leaving behind stories more permanent than spoken word. In Egypt, art was inseparable from religion. Temples and tombs became canvases, walls covered in vivid scenes of daily life, the afterlife, and the gods who watched both. Every line had meaning. Every color, every pose was part of a sacred code, and towering above all, the pyramids. Geometry made immortal, the Greeks brought the human form to life. Their statues captured youth, motion, and balance, seeking not just beauty, but perfection. Columns rose in elegant rhythm, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, temples that seemed to breathe in harmony with the land. Even their pottery told stories, heroes, gods, and mortal struggle, all spun around vessels of clay. The Romans inherited Greece's grace, but added scale and strength. They built arches, domes, and roads that crossed continents. Their sculptures bore the wrinkles of real faces. Their mosaics shimmered with 1,000 colored stones. Art for Rome was propaganda and praise. The empire built to last, and so did its monuments. In the east, the terracotta army stood guard over China's first emperor, an entire army, silent and eternal. In India, cave temples bloomed with carvings of gods, dancers, and cosmic myths, etched deep into rock. Across the world, art was the fingerprint of culture, and in every line, every statue, the ancient world speaks. On clay tablets baked in the sun, scribes etched one of the world's oldest stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of friendship, loss, and the quest for immortality. It asked the questions we still ask today. The Egyptians wrote to guide souls through the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was not just a text, it was a passport to eternity. They also wrote hymns, poems, and wisdom sayings, lessons for life and legacy, penned in hieroglyphs that shimmered with meaning. In Greece, literature flourished in every form. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey painted war and wonder with poetic fire. On the stage, playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides explored human weakness, fate, and the gods' cruelty. And in quiet courtyards, philosophers wrote the foundations of Western thought, Plato's Republic, Aristotle's Ethics and Logic, timeless and bold. Rome continued the tradition. Virgil's Aeneid gave Rome its mythic origin. Cicero and Seneca sharpened rhetoric and reason. Livy and Tacitus wrote the chronicles of empire. Heroes, tyrants, and tragedies preserved forever. In China, Confucius taught order and virtue, lessons compiled in the Analects. Taoists wrote of harmony and nature. Poets like Ku Yuan wrote with fire and grief, casting personal pain into national memory. Their words shaped dynasties, their ideas shaped civilization. Mesopotamians mapped the stars, tracked the moon, and developed early calendars. They divided time into units we still use, 60 seconds, 60 minutes. Their math, simple but powerful, allowed for trade, farming, and construction. The Egyptians practiced medicine millennia ahead of their time. Papyrus scrolls detailed wounds, diagnoses, and even brain surgery. Their engineering skills built pyramids that still baffle the modern world. Greek thinkers asked not just what, but why. Thales searched for the fundamental element of all things. Pythagoras turned music into math. Hippocrates separated illness from superstition. And Aristotle, perhaps the greatest of them all, tried to categorize the entire world. Rome was science applied. Roads that stretched for thousands of miles. Aqueducts that carried clean water to millions. Concrete that could harden underwater. cities built with logic and purpose, and doctors like Galen, whose works would influence medicine for centuries. The Chinese invented the compass, seismograph, and paper. Indian mathematicians pioneered the concept of zero and advanced trigonometry. Their science flowed through trade routes, east and west, seeding knowledge across continents. The achievements of the ancient world were not lost. They were preserved, copied, studied, and reborn. When Rome fell, monks saved manuscripts. When empires collapsed, ideas survived. And when the Renaissance came, it came carrying scrolls from Greece and Rome, Egypt and Babylon. Culture is the soul of history, and art, literature, and science are its heartbeat. The ancients carved gods into stone, but they also carved curiosity into the human spirit. Their stories became our myths. Their thoughts became our foundations. Their wonders became our inheritance. In every library, every laboratory, every canvas and classroom, the ancient world lives on. This is their legacy, and now it is ours. Civilizations rise, empires fall, but wisdom endures. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the soul of antiquity. Long before the Renaissance, long before the name Da Vinci meant genius, there was a man whose brilliance helped shape the foundations of civilization. A man who designed with stone and healed with knowledge. His name was Imhotep. Around 2700 BCE, in the sands of ancient Egypt, a polymath was born. Imhotep, whose name means he who comes in peace, was no ordinary man. He served under Pharaoh Djoser during Egypt's third dynasty, not just as a vizier, but as high priest, architect, physician, and scribe. In an age ruled by kings, he rose through intellect, not blood. When Pharaoh Djoser sought to create a tomb unlike any other, he turned to Imhotep. What followed was revolutionary. At Saqqara, Imhotep designed the step pyramid, a structure that broke with tradition. Instead of a flat tomb, he stacked 6 mastabas, creating a staircase to the heavens. It became the world's first monumental stone building, launching an era of Egyptian pyramid construction. For the first time, cut limestone was used on such a scale, precision and permanence in every block. Imhotep wasn't just building a tomb, he was building a legacy. But Imhotep's genius didn't end with stone. He was also a physician, whose medical insights would echo across centuries. Though his original writings are lost to time, later Egyptian doctors referenced his wisdom. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest known surgical texts, reflects an empirical, almost modern approach to diagnosis and treatment. Imhotep understood the body, not just in mysticism, but in method. He is said to have diagnosed wounds, performed surgeries, and separated science from superstition, a healer centuries ahead of his time. After his death, something remarkable happened. Imhotep was deified, one of the only non-royals in Egyptian history to receive such an honor. By the time of the New Kingdom, temples were built in his name. Pilgrims came seeking cures. He became the god of medicine and healing, worshipped for over 2,000 years. In the Greco-Roman period, he was identified with Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. His legend crossed cultures, his name engraved in both prayer and stone. Imhotep's influence stretched across disciplines. Architecture, he changed how Egypt built for eternity. Medicine, he laid the groundwork for rational, observational healing. Spirituality, he bridged human wisdom and divine reverence. To this day, the step pyramid still stands. Long before Homer, before Confucius, before the ink of any famous poet was ever spilled, there was Enheduanna. Enheduanna was the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, one of history's first great conquerors. To secure his rule over Sumer, he appointed her as high priestess of the moon god Nana in the sacred city of Ur. But Enheduanna was more than just a royal figurehead. She became a spiritual leader, a diplomat, and ultimately, a voice for the divine. Among her surviving works is a breathtaking hymn called The Exaltation of Inanna. In it she pours her soul into praise for the goddess of love, war, and justice, Inanna. Queen of all powers, resplendent light, you storm across the land, shaking the foundations of heaven and earth. In this poem, Enheduanna does something extraordinary. She writes in the first person, using I to express her devotion, her struggles, her humanity. She's not just praising a goddess, she's revealing herself. As high priestess, she helped unify the Sumerian and Akkadian religions, a critical move for the young empire. She used her words as both prayer and propaganda, shaping the political and spiritual fabric of the time. Her works were so revered, they were copied and recopied for centuries. Enheduanna became a cultural icon, a woman whose voice defined the sacred. Today we remember her not just because she wrote, but because she had the courage to claim her words, to sign her name, and to speak with a voice that demanded to be heard, not as a ruler's daughter, not as a myth, but as a person. Enheduanna reminds us that the written word is more than ink on clay. It's a mirror of the soul, and hers, across 4 millennia, still speaks. She was the first to say, I am the author, and the world has never been the same. Before modern hospitals, before antiseptics, before anesthesia, there was a man in ancient India who opened the body to heal it. His name was Sushruta, and he is remembered as the father of surgery. Around the 6th century BCE, in the sacred city of Kashi, modern-day Varanasi, a school of medicine flourished. At its heart was Sushruta, physician, teacher, and pioneer. Unlike the mystics of his time, Sushruta believed that true healing required knowledge, observation, and skilled hands. His life's work became a monumental text, the Sushruta Samhita, a vast medical encyclopedia covering over 180 chapters, hundreds of herbal remedies, and more than 300 surgical procedures. In it, he described how to repair torn flesh, remove cataracts, treat fractures, and even perform reconstructive surgery, including nose reshaping, centuries before it was known as plastic surgery. Training under Sushruta wasn't just about theory. His students learned by doing. He had them practice incisions on ripe fruit, animal bladders, and leather bags filled with fluids to simulate real tissues. He cataloged 120 surgical tools, scalpels, forceps, probes, many crafted from stone or bronze. He operated without modern anesthesia, relying on herbal sedatives and trained assistants. His techniques laid the groundwork for trauma care and surgical intervention, centuries before the West would catch up. For generations, his teachings were passed from healer to healer. They crossed borders, translated into Arabic, Persian, and Greek, influencing surgeons in the Islamic Golden Age and beyond. Even today, many of his insights resonate in modern medicine: cleanliness, precision, observation, and compassion. Sushruta saw the human body not as a mystery to be feared, but as a puzzle to be understood. He cut not to harm, but to heal. He wrote not for glory, but for the generations to come. In the history of medicine, his name is etched like a scalpel's mark, deep, precise, and enduring. He charted the heavens, captured the tremors of the earth, and turned flowing water into machines of wonder. In an age of emperors and poets, he stood apart, a mind centuries ahead of his time. His name was Zhang Heng. Zhang Heng lived during the Eastern Han Dynasty from 78 to 139 CE, a golden age of art, science, and imperial power. He was not just a court official. He was a mathematician, astronomer, engineer, poet, inventor, and a visionary. In the year 132 CE, Zheng Heng built a machine that could detect earthquakes from hundreds of kilometers away. No wires, no electronics, just mechanical genius. His invention, the world's first seismoscope, used a system of levers and pendulums hidden inside a bronze urn. When the earth shook, the mechanism would trigger one dragon's mouth to open, dropping a ball into a corresponding toad below, revealing the direction of the quake, even if it wasn't felt locally. When it detected a distant tremor, and days later news arrived confirming it, Zhang Heng's status was sealed. He had done what no one else could. He gave the earth a voice. But Zhang Heng's gaze was not fixed only on the ground. He looked upward and reimagined the cosmos. He built a rotating celestial globe, powered by water, tracking the movement of the stars and planets. He was the first in China to propose that the moon's light came from the sun, and that eclipses were caused by the moon passing between the earth and the sun. In an age of mythology, Zhang Heng used observation and reason to explain the mysteries of the sky. Zhang Heng didn't just imagine, he engineered hydraulic-powered machines, water clocks, intricate gears and rotation systems, long before they were known elsewhere. He also contributed to cartography, urging for mathematical precision in map-making. He helped lay the foundations for modern geodesy, the science of measuring Earth itself. But even in his science, there was poetry. Zhang Heng was a writer of elegance and soul. In his famous Ode to the Hot Springs, he wrote not just about nature's beauty, but about humanity's place within the cosmos. He believed science and art were not opposites, but partners in understanding truth. Zhang Heng's inventions and ideas spread far beyond his lifetime. Though many of his designs were lost to time, his influence remained. In science, in philosophy, in the enduring spirit of curiosity. In a city of scrolls and stars, one voice rose above the others. A woman, a philosopher, a teacher. In an age when few listened to women, they came from across the empire to learn from her. Her name was Hypatia of Alexandria, and her life still echoes through the ages. Alexandria, city of learning, home to the great library and some of the finest minds in history. By the 4th century, it had become a crossroads of cultures. Greek philosophy, Roman governance, and early Christianity colliding in a boiling pot of ideas and tensions. In this world stepped Hypatia, the daughter of Theon, a mathematician and astronomer. But soon she would surpass even her father's fame. Hypatia taught mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, especially Neoplatonism, which sought harmony between the mind and the universe. Her classrooms weren't bound by walls. People came from far and wide to hear her ideas. She taught logic, virtue, and reason, believing the human soul could ascend through understanding. She wrote commentaries on Diophantus, Apollonius, and Ptolemy, preserving knowledge and adding to it. And yet she never claimed authority, only clarity. But her brilliance was not without cost. Hypatia lived in a time of deep transformation. Christianity was rising in political power. Philosophy, once revered, was seen by some as a threat. She was respected, yes, but she was also a woman, a pagan, and a voice of reason in a city divided by zealotry. In 415 CE, a violent mob, fueled by religious and political rage, attacked Hypatia. They dragged her from her chariot into a church. There she was brutally killed, her body torn apart by those who feared what she represented. Her death sent shockwaves across the empire. She had become a martyr not of faith, but of free thought. But knowledge is not so easily destroyed. Her works, her teachings, survived through students and scholars, and her name lived on as a symbol of intellect, courage, and clarity. Today, she stands among the greats, not only as a woman ahead of her time, but as a beacon of reason in an age of rising darkness. Hypatia taught us that knowledge should never fear authority, that truth is worth pursuing, even when dangerous, and that even in death, a voice of wisdom can echo louder than 1,000 shouts of fear. She was not just the last philosopher of Alexandria, she was its brightest flame. In the heart of the ancient China, when women were rarely seen in the halls of history, one woman not only wrote it, she helped to define it. She was a historian, a poet, and a teacher. Her name was Ban Zhao. Born around 35 CE, during the Han Dynasty, Banzhou was the daughter of a noble and literary family. Her father and brothers were scholars. Her brother, Ban Gu, began compiling one of China's greatest historical texts, the Han Shu, or Book of Han. But when Ban Gu died before completing it, Banzhou took up the brush and finished what history began. Banzhou became the first known female historian in Chinese history. She compiled the biographies, court records, and imperial annals, crafting a detailed narrative of the Han Dynasty's rulers, wars, reforms, and culture. Her contributions were not footnotes. They were foundational. Her hand helped shape how China would remember its past. But Banzhou wasn't only writing about emperors and generals. She also turned her attention to women and penned one of the earliest known guides on women's conduct and education, Lessons for Women. In it, she emphasized virtue, modesty, and devotion. Yes, but also education, wisdom, and the value of a woman's mind. To many today, her words may seem traditional or even restrictive, but in her time, Banzhou's message was radical. Girls should be educated. Women should read and write. Banzhou's wisdom earned her a rare position of power. She became a tutor to the empress and advisor to the royal family. Her knowledge guided policies and personalities from behind the curtain of the throne. For centuries, Banzhou's writings shaped how women in China were taught, seen, and understood. The rise and fall of the Roman Republic is one of the most captivating and complex narratives in ancient history, offering a window into the evolving dynamics of power, governance, and military conquest. Established in 509 BCE, following the overthrow of the last Roman king, Tarquin the Proud, the Roman Republic was founded on the ideals of shared power and civic duty. The Romans rejected monarchy, replacing it with a system based on elected officials who were expected to represent the interests of both the aristocracy and the common people. The political structure of the Republic was designed to prevent any single individual from accumulating too much power, with key positions such as consuls, senators, and tribunes, each playing distinct and critical roles in the administration of the state. The consuls, two elected officials who served for one-year terms, held executive power and commanded the Roman legions in times of war, while the Senate, composed of Rome's elite patrician class, was responsible for making important decisions on matters of foreign policy, finance, and law. The tribunes, meanwhile, were elected by the plebeians, the common people, and had the unique power to veto actions taken by other government officials if they were seen as harmful to the interests of the lower classes. This separation of powers, with built-in checks and balances, was a hallmark of the Roman Republic, and for several centuries, it allowed Rome to function as a relatively stable and growing state. However, this balance of power was often fragile, and tensions between the patricians and plebeians, known as the conflict of the orders, were a constant feature of Roman life. The plebeians, who made up the majority of the population, were often excluded from the highest offices and political privileges, leading to widespread discontent. Over time, the plebeians fought for and won a series of reforms that granted them more rights and access to power. Key milestones in this struggle included the establishment of the office of the tribune, the publication of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written code of laws in 450 BCE, and the eventual opening of high offices such as the consulship to plebeians in the 4th century BC. Despite these gains, class divisions remained a persistent issue, and the power struggles between Rome's elites and commoners often led to political instability. Throughout the Republic's history, Rome's military conquests played a crucial role in shaping its political system. As Rome expanded from a small city-state to control much of the Mediterranean world, it relied heavily on its legions to secure victories and expand its territory. However, the very success of these military campaigns introduced new challenges. Roman generals, who were often granted immense authority over their troops, began to wield power that rivaled that of the Senate and the consuls. As Rome's borders stretched further, military leaders like Gaius Marius, Sulla, Pompey the Great, and Julius Caesar grew more influential, leading to a shift in power away from the traditional republican institutions. The rise of powerful generals marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. In the 2nd century BCE, Gaius Marius, a general who had reformed the Roman army by allowing the landless poor to enlist, effectively created a standing army that owed its loyalty to its commanders rather than the state. This shift was significant because it allowed generals to build personal armies that could be used to pursue their own political ambitions, rather than acting solely in the service of the Republic. Marius's reforms, though initially designed to strengthen the Republic, unwittingly contributed to its decline, as military leaders began to see themselves as well as political power brokers. The tensions reached a boiling point during the rivalry between Marius and the general Sulla, which culminated in Sulla's march on Rome in 88 BC. Sulla's victory and subsequent dictatorship set a precedent for future military intervention in Roman politics, as he used his control over the legions to eliminate his enemies and concentrate power in his own hands. His brief but autocratic rule left a lasting mark on Roman politics, and while he eventually resigned in favor of restoring the Republic, the damage had been done. The next major phase in the decline of the Republic came with the rise of Julius Caesar, a general whose military conquests in Gaul, modern-day France, elevated him to legendary status. Caesar's popularity and the loyalty he commanded from his troops made him a powerful force in Roman politics. In 49 BCE, Caesar famously crossed the Rubicon River with his army, an act of rebellion that signaled the end of the Republic's stability and the beginning of a civil war between Caesar and his former ally, Pompey. Caesar's victory in this civil war, followed by his appointment as dictator for life in 44 BCE, marked the final blow to the traditional republican system. Although Caesar's reign brought reforms, including land redistribution and public works projects, his consolidation of power alarmed many in the Senate, who saw him as a threat to the Republic's values and the checks on monarchical rule. In March 44 BCE, a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, assassinated Caesar in the hope of restoring the Republic. However, this act of violence did not lead to a return to republicanism. Instead, it plunged Rome into further civil war, as Caesar's supporters, particularly his adopted heir Octavian, later Augustus, vied for control of the state. The final collapse of the Roman Republic came with the rise of Augustus, who, after defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra in 31 BCE, became the first emperor of Rome. Augustus, though careful to maintain the appearance of republican institutions, effectively became the sole ruler of Rome, with the Senate relegated to a ceremonial role. The transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire marked a fundamental shift in how Rome was governed. While Augustus presented himself as a restorer of the Republic, he consolidated all executive, military, and religious power in his own hands, transforming the political landscape and setting the stage for centuries of imperial rule. The Republic, which had once been a symbol of shared power and civic duty, was replaced by an autocracy in which the emperor was the supreme authority. The political, social, and military changes that occurred during the Republic's rise and fall had profound implications, not only for Rome, but for the entire Mediterranean world. The lessons of the Roman Republic about the dangers of unchecked power, the fragility of political systems, and the risks of militarization continue to resonate in modern political thought, making it one of the most significant and enduring periods of ancient history.